I'm Philip Hackett. Today my special guest is Roland Butcher, a man who is well known for his cricketing exploits, although there's a lot more to Roland Butcher than cricket. In fact, Roland, welcome to MRD Chatroom.
Thank you, Philip. It's a great pleasure to be here and back where we are right now.
Yes, and you said back where we are. That's interesting because you have documented your life's journey under the title Breaking Barriers, Barbados to England and back. That's important. You're back. But what prompted you to document your life's journey?
Well, Philip, I think basically, when you've been in the game for as long as I have, the stage we're at right now, we're not going to get any younger. So it is a case of actually getting something down on paper where you can still remember what actually happened. But no, to be honest, really, I knew I would have to do it sometime, but there were no great rational plans to do it. But I think Dr. Sasha Sutherland, who has been a very close friend of mine since I came to university when I came back in 2004. She was a student here, and we worked on many projects, etc. She'd been, for the last couple of years, saying to me, you need to write your autobiography. And, the case with men, you say, yeah, sure, but...
Just to get it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. So that happened. But last year when I came back from England, around the mid-October time, and figured I would have some time here in the Caribbean, I thought, something, maybe I should start writing this book. So I called her up and I said, listen, basically I've decided to write the book. She said, great. And in anticipation that I had got someone in England to write it. And I said, by the way, you're writing it. So she was shocked because she's never written a book before.
Okay.
But I always figured that, that she would be able to do it and do it well, because I've seen what she's been able to do over the years, and I knew there wouldn't be a problem, that she would do a great job, and she's done a fantastic job in co-authoring this book.
So you said the middle of October. That seems a relatively short time, but that must have been a very intense period.
It was. I think basically what happened was that once we decided to start, I always had in my mind that we needed it to be ready in April for the cricket season. Because there's no point in missing out the cricket season when everybody's thinking of cricket and out, especially in the UK and places like that. So the deadline always was April. It was just a question of whether you could get it done between October and April. And yes, we've got it done. She worked tirelessly. We worked some nights till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're still on Zoom. And we got there. So it can be done, and it was done.
The thing about it is that Roland Butcher, the cricketer, is of course Roland Butcher, the football coach, and we can go on. But there's also Roland Butcher, the educator. Having come back to Barbados, I'm not so sure what you did along that line in England, but coming back to Barbados and working at the University of the West Indies, in the role in which you played, you obviously have an understanding of the importance of education and development of a person. And I would be surprised if the book isn't geared towards that as well.
Yeah, Philip, you're right. The book says what it says: breaking barriers, Barbados to England and back. Yes, I broke various barriers in England, but same thing when I came back to Barbados. I had to break other barriers here as well in order to get what you spoke about there in terms of education. We're sitting here at the university, a place that I ended up spending 15 years as director of sport, doing just that, developing education and sport for student athletes around the Caribbean. So, education is very, very important to me. I believe that education and sport can go hand in hand. There's no need for one or the other, which has been the case in the Caribbean for a very long time, that talented sports people came to university and because of our families thinking that education is the be all and end all, that they've had to put the sport, as they say, beyond the boundary and concentrate on their degrees. What we set out to do here from 2004 is to develop a system where people coming to university with talent didn't have to do that they could effectively study, they could play sport at the highest level, and do both. And it's just a case of balancing the time. That's all it was, just a case of balancing the time. I think we've partly done that. There's still a lot of work to be done because a lot of our families in the Caribbean still believe that education and be a doctor, lawyer is the be all and end all. But you've only got to look at sports persons around the world, see their impact and their earning capacity, to tell you that sport is a huge, huge occupation and something that the Caribbean need to catch on to quickly.
I recall a couple of people I've come across in life, some rather close to me, professional musicians in those cases, who have shared to me that as they pursue or try to pursue full-time life in music, they had some pressure from family members who would ask, well, when are you going to get a real job? Were you ever faced with that? I mean, I know you're a family man from quite early. Were you ever faced with that pressure of, well, Roland, come on, this cricket thing is okay for Saturday afternoons and Sundays after church, but where are you going to go and look for a job?
Yeah, so, listen, within my family, friends or so-called friends, most definitely. I've had that all the time, particularly in a place like England, where the perception is, or was, that a black person cannot achieve his dream. So, some of my own family, and as I said, other West Indians would be saying, forget that idea, you're never going to make it. And they're finding all of these barriers as to why you can't make it. But the biggest problem was that the belief that because you're black, you're not gonna make it, and that's really sad coming from your own people. I don't have a difficulty in another race saying to me, listen, you're not gonna make it. Then it's still a personal thing for me to want to chase that. Mm-hmm. But when your own people are thinking like that, then that's the real problem for me, because they are limiting themselves and their family and their kids in their thinking of what's possible. So yes, I came across that quite a lot in England.
The one barrier that you did break, no doubt, being the first black man to play for England. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that basically was the whole idea of the breaking barriers, because when I played for England in 1980-81 as the first black player to play for England, that was a barrier that was broken, one that stood for centuries. Was a significant milestone in England for English people. It was a significant milestone, or should have been a significant milestone for black people, because it never happened before. And it should have also worked as an inspiration for all young West Indians and other peoples in England who could see now that, hang on, this is possible. He has made it. There's nothing special about him. If he can make it, then I can. So, the fact that I was selected for England was, it was a huge turning point in UK for black people to start thinking that outdated thought process of we can't make it in this country is a myth, and with hard work you can do it.
So what lessons does the book hold that young people especially can hold on to maybe change that mindset?
Well, that's a good question, Philip. As I said, this book it captures my life from a kid in Barbados to go into England, what happened in England in my development to becoming a first-class cricketer, to becoming an international cricketer, also after being a cricketer, what happened there, etc., etc. But I think the most important part about this book is the fact that it really is a teaching tool for young people to understand what is required, in order to achieve something that you want to achieve. We all have dreams, and this book really points out very clearly to those persons who may have limited thoughts about achieving that there is a pathway to do it, and there's some lessons in here as to what their responsibilities also become after they've done that. Just like my responsibility when I broke the barrier of being the first black. It wasn't a case of just the first black playing cricket. I then had responsibilities for generations to come. I had to behave in a certain way. I had to keep that door open so that others could come through. So this book has in plenty about that for young people. And at some point in time during our discussions, I will read some of that wisdom for them to, and it doesn't have to be just young West Indians, but any young person who finds himself in a situation where there are barriers. And we do get barriers wherever we go. I mean, even here in Barbados, we've got barriers.
Sure.
So it will help them to overcome them and at least see that there's a picture on the other end of the screen.
Well, I think part of that responsibility came to the fore during that issue with what we call the rebel tours. I know that was a very difficult time for you. In fact, at one of your initial book launch, I remember listening to part of that being read, and it was captivating. It was gripping. It was like, you're watching a movie and you just want to see how it ends. And of course, being as clever as you were, you left us hanging a bit. But it certainly was very, very gripping. Maybe you want to share some favorite aspect that maybe of use to us, those who, as you said, we all face barriers from time to time. And just as you had that challenge in terms of the rebel tour, do I go, do I not go, what is my responsibility to myself, to my family, to the country, to the nation, to just about everybody. That was a big moment, and well, I'm sure that there were many others.
Yeah, I'll just speak a little on that tour. Obviously, in 1989, there was the news broke that a rebel England team was going to go to South Africa. Obviously, South Africa were in isolation. At that time, they were having to attract teams to come and play cricket in South Africa to make sure that their cricketers got the level of competition. So, 89, this story broke. The tour was going to be in 1990. I was selected in this England team to tour. It was coming towards the end of my cricketing career. I was at the end, and decisions had to be made. Made the initial decision to go for various reasons, which you can read in the book.
Yes,
but,
I can take a hit.
Yeah. But at the end of it, certain things happened, but the tour went ahead in 1990, and once you've read, you'll know what happens.
I don't know if you were there or not.
But in terms of some of the things in this book, I would like to read a few things here for young people, really, and like breaking barriers. What it means today, and the term breaking barriers has a timeless renaissance. It encapsulates courage, resilience, and the determination to push past limits imposed by society. For me, Roland Butcher, a cricketer who once shattered one of England's longest standing barriers by becoming its first black cricketer, those words really carry profound meaning. Not just for the moment when history was made in 1981, but for their enduring relevance today. So that is very important in terms of what breaking barriers means. Now, cricket obviously was my sport. You said football was another as well, but what is cricket's role in breaking barriers today? Cricket remains a sport of immense power and influence. In modern times, it's not only a game but also a platform for advocacy and change. Players today have the opportunity and the responsibility to use their voices to challenge systemic issues, from racism and inequality to mental health and stigma. The game has seen positive steps over time, like players taking the lead in support of racial injustice. Yet, breaking barriers in cricket today is about more than representation. It's about creating environments where everyone feels they belong. It's about challenging outdated systems, ensuring access for young players from marginalized communities, which we do have also here in the Caribbean, celebrating the unique perspective they bring to the sport. So that's what cricket can do for breaking barriers today. Now, the wider meaning of breaking barriers. For me, breaking barriers is a mindset. It's the ability to recognize that the obstacles before us are often built by fear. As we said before, that fear is built by maybe experiences that your families have had in the past. They don't want it to happen to you, so they build up this idea that you're taking on something that you're going to fail. So it's before us are often built by fear, ignorance, or complacency, and then finding the courage to dismantle them. So whether in sport, business, or daily life, breaking barriers requires a collective effort. What are the challenges that persist? So despite the progress made, really, many barriers still exist. Stories of discrimination within cricket and other sports continue to emerge. So this is a stark reminder that representation alone cannot solve deeply ingrained problems. It's not enough to open the door. As I said, we must ensure that it stays open, providing genuine opportunities for others to step through.
I suppose, in a sense, the program that you mentioned earlier at UWA, where athletes, Caribbean athletes especially, but I do believe it also occurred in a couple of other sports.
All the other sports as well.
Didn't have to give up their sport to study. I suppose, in a sense, that could be considered breaking a barrier.
Well, it was breaking a barrier because in the Caribbean, we didn't have that before. I mean, that's, as you would know, exists in the US for God knows how long. Universities in the US are run by their sports programs. The sports programs bring in tremendous amount of money to run the rest of the university. In my role here at the university, I was fortunate to travel extensively in that role, and I remember going to Penn State University. And Penn State University has a NFL football stadium that holds 120,000 people, and that was filled twice a week with people paying $20 to watch the game. Now, you do those sums, that is huge money, and that's only a week, so it is a whole season.
Yeah.
And so that was the sort of finance that was generated by the sport that went into running the university, not just running university sport, but in running the entire university. We have been very slow in this region to catch on to that concept because we, unfortunately, a lot of our families still believe that sport is sport, you're making sport. And as you said before, when you're going to get a decent job? Why are you messing around with this sport? But the education has to take place not just with the kids, but I think our parents probably first have to be educated that if your son or daughter has a passion and the ability to do well in sport, you've got to support them all the way. Absolutely.
You're a team man, Roland. In fact, playing cricket in itself, it's hard to be successful if you don't have that team mentality. Yes, there's that part of you that has to focus on self because you're of no use to the team if you don't perform. But basically, you're operating under a team concept. Now, I believe that there are teams outside of the cricket team that can impact a person's success, and family is certainly one of them.
Yes, family. Listen, family is key because if you're not getting support from your family, it's a tough journey. If one, they're not coming with you from a young age, supported you. If they are telling you what you're doing is wrong and you will not be successful. All of those things that can impact a player. It would take a young person, you would have to be extremely strong to be able to ignore all of that advice coming from so-called persons who should know better, to then go forward. So it is so important for us to support our kids in whatever they choose to do. It may not be what you want them to do, but at the end of the day, they have to live with it. It's what they want to do. Very often there's lots of things that parents push their kids into. They don't really want to do it. They do a pretty poor job in the end, and eventually they walk away from it, and there's a problem within the families. Our families have to get away from that idea of, it's what he wants. No, I've had my time. I've made my choices. This is what he wants. I would give him advice, but I would support him and her all the way through, and wherever it takes them. If it don't make it, then they will realize and they'll do something else, but give them that opportunity to do it.
But you embarked on creating your own family at a relatively early age,
Well, you say early. I was 27, I think, when I...
Well, that's early for some sportsmen. Some sportsmen love to have a grand time, and then after retirement, maybe you might want to take life a bit more seriously. But I think in your situation, though, that family support within that union played a big role.
Yes, I think my upbringing here was important. I was brought up with my grandmother. I was one of 7 grands that she brought up, and my aunt, Olga. And basically, those old folks back then were poor, but they really had serious values. And I couldn't get away with any nonsense then. And I think that stood me in good stead really going forward, and it also helped me to appreciate that. Because you come from a poor family doesn't mean that you can't achieve anything. So my upbringing was really vital for me, particularly when I got to a place like England, which was different and new. I could call upon my upbringing to get me through.
And I think there are other, you could probably say, iconic persons in Barbados who were exposed to a similar type of background or family background.
Oh yes, I think back, I would say I was born in 53, but I would say certainly up to the 90s, I would say that the majority of people in Barbados would have gone through that very strict...
But remember, your close family members who many of us know, but don't necessarily make the connection.
Oh yes, well I think you're probably talking about one in particular. But
two in particular.
Yeah, but listen, they went through they went through the same thing in terms of, the family being very, very positive in their lives. As you know, some of them have taken on their own lives now. Mm-hmm. And, but listen, I think back then, my upbringing was really very important for me, especially as I said in a place like England.
Well, I was trying to get the plastic bag and maybe the Andrew Mason out of you, but you seem not to.
Well, those are family members, and obviously they would have had to be pretty strong and determined in what they wanted to do. Andrew Mason would not have had a commentator in his family before. And then I'm sure he would have had many opportunities where people have told him, Andrew, the foolishness you do, commentating is not something that you should do. And the same thing with Red Plastic Bag. He the same thing. No Calypsonians in his family, so again he probably would have had to fight and break those barriers to become a top Calypsonian. And as you know, our own good friend Ricky Elcock, who not only became an international cricketer, but became a pilot for Virgin, the first black pilot for Virgin. And he had to get over the fact that having visited an aircraft carrier in Barbados as a kid, and going home where they had these planes, and we sat in the cockpit and everything, went back home to his experience, he wanted to be a pilot. Mm-hmm. To be told, his father told him, Ricky, black people don't fly planes. So I guess he used that also as inspiration to break that barrier. And he did, and thank God he did.
And hopefully his father was still around to see that.
Well, unfortunately, his father wasn't. So that's the unfortunate thing about life. It doesn't give you any guarantees. But unfortunately, his father was not around to see him achieve that ambition. But I would imagine that he would have been very proud when it happened. And he probably would have regretted. But sometimes, listen, when people say these things, sometimes it's good because it can act as an inspiration. And in Ricky's case, it certainly acted as an inspiration. I'll show them. And in my case too, where people in England were telling me, you're never going to make it, you're not going to play for England, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. So in many ways it also helped me, to be motivated to achieve more.
What role did your other half play in all this?
Oh, huge. Listen, I met my wife in 1976, so I wasn't even an established first-class cricketer then. So, she really was the rock. I just played the game, but she was the rock. She looked after the kids, looked after her family. Don't forget I was away playing cricket all the time. So school, homework, when they're sick, holidays, everything she had to take care of, as well as me moaning when things are not going well. And then of course, I had a horrendous injury in 1983, which must have been very, very difficult for her. Obviously, it was difficult for me for the fact that I couldn't play for a year, but she had to endure my moodiness and sulking and wondering whether I'd ever play again, and then helping me with the recovery in terms of when I had the double vision, throwing balls to me to catch and hitting the park and stuff. So no, she's been fantastic and continue to be.
It's interesting though that there's no one else, as far as I'm aware, in your family since then who's taken up the game. Is that some evidence of the Barriers in themselves, and that they have sought their own pathway?
Yeah, I think maybe a lot of them may not have had the ambition to be cricketers. I mean, my own son, I think, he played for a while, but then he stopped. Maybe he didn't want the comparison, which most kids tend to get to the appearance. He went in other directions, but other parts of the family did excel in other sports. My cousin George Parrish became a football player for West Ham. He played probably 15 years for West Ham.
Okay.
At the top level. So he's probably the last, and then we've had some other family in other sports, but cricket-wise, I can't think of any or many that have decided that cricket is the way for them.
Well, before I ask you to maybe go directly into how maybe young people in our environment in Barbados, and there may be something in it as well for others, maybe some direct advice to them. I'll give you the opportunity if there's something else you want to share from the book, because as I told you, when I heard extracts from it, it was really exciting stuff, and I can really recommend it as a good read.
Yeah, I'll just start with really the legacy of breaking barriers. Ultimately, breaking barriers is a legacy that transcends time. For me, being the first black man to play for England, it was a milestone, but it was only the beginning. The real achievement lies in the opportunities it created for others, the conversations it sparked, and the belief it instilled in countless individuals. So today, breaking barriers means continuing that work, fostering inclusivity, empowering the next generation, and ensuring that cricket and the world is a place where everyone has a chance to succeed. So for me, that's very important, that legacy of breaking barriers. Now, inspiring the next generation, as I reflect on my journey from the fields of Barbados to the cricket grounds of Middlesex in England, I'm reminded that my story is not just my own. It belongs to every young boy and girl who dares to dream. To those who face barriers, yet aspire to break them. So inspiring the next generation is a responsibility I carry with pride, but it is they who will shape the future of cricket and beyond. So that is important in terms of inspiring the next generation. Now, some lessons from my journey. Inspiring the next generation starts with sharing the lessons I've learned along the way. That's important. One, hard work and perseverance. Nothing in life is given, it is earned. The path to success requires dedication, discipline, and a willingness to overcome setbacks. Two, embrace your identity. There were times when I felt the weight of being different, but I learned to see my heritage and background as strengths, not weaknesses. Three, stay resilient. Criticism and doubt will come, but there are opportunities to prove your worth. Use them as fuel to keep moving forward. So those three things that I've learned from my journey for sure, that helped me get to where I wanted to, and I'm sure it will help any other young person to get, if they keep those things in mind, to get to where they want to. Breaking barriers for the future. Right. Now, this is also very, very important.
Okay.
Right. The next generation, the barriers they face may look different from those of my time, but they still exist. Discrimination, lack of access to opportunities, and economic challenges continue to prevent many talented young players from reaching their full potential. So inspiring the next generation means working to remove those barriers. It means advocating for greater diversity in cricket, ensuring that resources and facilities are accessible to all, and creating pathways for young people from underrepresented communities. These are very, very important factors to ensure that our young people can progress in the future. Just to finish with here, we've got really the role of today's players. Right? Today's cricketers, they have a unique opportunity to inspire the next generation. Social media, global tournaments, and community outreach programs give them unprecedented reach. But with that comes responsibility. Young people don't just watch what you do on the field, they pay attention to how you carry yourself off it. So that's also a lesson to be learned. And my message to young cricketers, to the young cricketers of today, my message is simple. Dream big, set goals that excite and challenge you. No dream is too ambitious. Work hard. Talent will only take you so far. It's hard work that makes the difference. Stay true to yourself. Celebrate who you are and where you come from. Your uniqueness is your strength. Lift others up as you climb. Reach back to help others. Inspire those who look up to you.
Roland, certainly very good words of advice there. But if you're going to get maybe a bit more personal in terms of experiences that you've had, just one or two of the stories that have stayed with you.
Yes, one that I would perhaps talk about is when I was selected for England. Now, there were a lot of English people who were delighted. There were a lot of English people who were not delighted.
I wonder.
There were a lot of black people who were delighted, and there were a lot of black people who were not delighted.
Okay.
So, those, and I got letters of support, I got letters the other side from both white, both black. But there's one that really resonates with me simply because I can remember it word for word. And it was from a black guy who obviously didn't agree with being selected for England. And I remember that he started off, "Dear Butcher, you have now taken black people back to the days of slavery." He said, "Judas got 30 pieces of silver. How many are you getting?" So that was one of somebody that looked like me. That was his take on my selection for England. He didn't see it as any sort of achievement. So I would really wonder, you know, what he achieved in England, what he was doing in England. And not so much worried about him, but I would really like to know what's happened to his children and their grandchildren with that type of thinking.
The journey to England and back. A lot happened, and a lot of lessons to be learned. Closing thoughts?
Yes, I mean, this really, hopefully I'll have a few more years still in this land and other places, but yeah, this is, you know, a record of my journey from Barbados to England and back. Hopefully I'll be around long enough to add a few more chapters to this in the future, but
digital version possibly?
Yeah, yes, this is, who knows, but at the moment, you know, I just enjoy this with my family and my kids and grandkids, and take life one day at a time and enjoy it.
And of course encourage educational authorities, institutions, persons to make use of it in terms of preparing or helping to give further insight into our youngsters.
Yes, definitely. I think, you know, I've always believed in, for me, there have always been three phases of life, right? I've always believed that up to the 20s is for learning. I've always believed from that to the 60s is earning. And obviously from the 60s to whenever is returning. I know which category I'm in right now. It's the returning category. And I will continue to return as much as I can for as long as I can.
You've been watching MRD Chatroom. My special guest, Roland Butcher.